Would you want to live your whole life living a life that isn't truly yours? Self-sabotage is one of those ideas that stops you from living the life that you're meant to. You get in your head. You self-sabotage by scrolling on your phone for hours. Think of how badly you wanted to finish a goal or task and you were not able to because of the self-sabotage, and then you beat yourself up, and then it's a never-ending cycle of staying stuck, staying complacent, staying in your comfort zone. In your comfort zone. There are days that I try to do the work that I feel most aligned, but at the end of the day, I'm just kicking myself over. I find that there is something just preventing me from doing so. There's an inability from going forward. So today we're going to talk about self-sabotage. If you're new here, hello, my name is Natalie, and welcome to Save Your Spoon blog podcast. When we think about self-sabotage, we often think about your friend keeps on going after the same guys because she is complacent. She doesn't see her true self-worth. I think about when you are so stressed out that you just want to go out and party all night. I've been there. I know. So I'm going to talk about how I have been self-sabotaging in real time. Talk about ways that you could see that you're doing it yourself. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a couple strategies that are actually beneficial and things that I am currently utilizing to push forward and just teach myself that it's okay and it's safe to go out of my comfort zone and really fulfill my potential. Self-sabotage can be very innocuous. I started the podcast Save Your Spoon about a year and 2 months ago now, which is crazy. I really wanted to inspire people who had chronic conditions like me. I was recently diagnosed with mixed connective tissue disease, and I wanted to connect with people that were in a similar position. I also wanted to integrate my love for neuroscience and language processing, executive functioning skills. If you are new here, I'm a speech pathologist. I post about here sometimes. Click here if you're interested. About a couple months in, I transitioned. I was wow, I'm feeling healthier in some ways. I still have chronic fatigue, but my ANA blood test that you look to see if your autoimmune disease is still active, my ANA was no longer positive. And I'm well, I feel like a fraud. And I feel like I should pivot to something maybe a little bit more lucrative, a little bit more aligned with a true business plan. For something that really started as a hobby that I wanted to connect with people and inspire people with chronic conditions and chronic fatigue being so prevalent, I had so much love and joy doing so. And it was almost like I replaced that chasing something that wasn't even my dream to begin with. I switched topics, which made it harder for people to consistently follow me. I wanted to dabble along with YouTube. I wanted to dabble along with blogging. I wanted to dabble along in this, and this, and this. I had all these different business ideas, and it was just difficult for me to really align with my core values and pick which one should I actually dedicate the most time to. And I think this happens with people a lot, especially if you are looking at goals outside of just work. If you're thinking about how am I going to consistently work out every day, or should I allocate more time to eating healthy or sleeping more? And there's all these different facets you can choose, but at the end of the day, which one do you actually align with the most? And so for me, I lost that joy, and I found it was hard to consistently show up on these different platforms and post and be the person that I wanted to be and connect with those who I actually felt drawn to. And although I was talking a lot about speech therapy, I have met amazing people, don't get me wrong. But I had to actually quickly think, are these dreams even mine? Was it coming from something that someone told me I should be doing? I thought about the times that I heard in the past that if you want to be successful in life, you have to own your own company, you have to own your own business, you have to go on your own. And I still, I do agree to that. know I like have an entrepreneurial mindset, and I know like I have ideas that I want to pursue as an independent clinician. But at the end of the day, is that why I started the YouTube and all of the podcasts? And I'll circle back, I promise. Was it something that I wanted to do because I loved, or is it because I was actually chasing the idea of making money? And as time continued, it was harder and harder for me to synthesize the information and find like, where was my why? Where was the meaning behind the content I was producing? And I love neuroscience. That's kind of like what I want to put out. There are a lot of overlaps between chronic health conditions and ADHD, autism. There's a lot of overlap between chronic fatigue and not being able to use your cognition to the full capacity. And just seeing that now and doing the journal work and doing the diving of where am I stopping myself, where am I scared, and where do I not feel aligned. There were times where I doubted my abilities. Like it was hard for me to concentrate, and I felt like I had different ideas popping up from every different facet, from every different angle. I like questioned my own authority. And it's hard coming from someone who has a master's degree in these things and has been out on the field and has specialized when it comes to language processing, when it comes to understanding the brain. And there even came a point where I found myself so busy that instead of me actually putting in the work to carve out time to make sure I was going to consistently do my hobby and reach out to others, I put the blame on an external resource. I put the blame on my full-time job, and I was like, hey, I'm not happy. I can't be the person that I want to be. And yes, my job was stressful. Jobs are stressful, but I didn't give myself the self-care to A, take care of myself during those times. B, did I say A? I didn't give myself the opportunity to take care of myself, let alone be my authentic self. And I just built up so much blame for others and so much resentment in this process. And at the end of the day, I felt very confident in my ability to speak, but I felt very confident in my ability to like present myself and be on camera. But when it came to some of the situations of like, would I be able to complete this task? Things that I told myself in the past started to pop up. Like when I had my brain injury, I was like, holy cannoli, I cannot focus. I cannot do these things. What if I'll never be organized like business leaders are supposed to be? And these hardships made it even harder for me, or more difficult for me to focus and actually show up as the person that I wanted to be. It was like I was hyperfixated on what I used to be. At one point I even got to the like idea, like, should I even pursue social media to any capacity? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Should I just give up and be a speech therapist full time, even though I have such a love and a drive to speak to other people about these topics? How I'm going to transition is, if you never try, you'll never put yourself in the position to fail. And a lot of people use that as a crutch. People like to numb or distract themselves when things get difficult. People like to run away. And I will get into some of these ideas, but the biggest one is, do you feel in your heart that you are deserving of what you truly want? And is what you think you want actually deep down what you want at your core? Some ways that you can self-sabotage, I mentioned a few already. Chasing after boys that aren't doing anything good for you. Staying in a position that isn't serving you. going out and using substances or using your phone, scrolling to numb the pain or run away from something that you should be doing. You might even find yourself like creating situations where things are going wrong at work, things are going wrong in your relationships, and this could be at the subconscious level. You're not able to actually recognize like when you are self-sabotaging. Think about where you feel safe. Our brain is wired to want us to stay complacent. It literally requires us less energy to stay the same than it is to go off and try to rewire and change things. Your brain wants to conserve that energy in the event that, think if a tiger or a bear starts running after you, your brain hasn't caught up with the development of like that stress versus an email ping stressor. And another big one, procrastination. When you just have this inability to actually take your first step forward into what you want to accomplish. Something that I think is really associated with this is like the dopamine norepinephrine response, where you actually get a stress response when you're beginning a task because of the fact that you maybe haven't done this before, don't know what the outcome is going to look like, maybe you're going in blind, and because of that, that stress response is going to signal a desire to procrastinate. If you've ever heard of Mr. Freud, if you took Psych 101, if you took AP Psych, you probably heard of the name. He is what we would kind of like consider the granddaddy of psychology. Now, Freud came up with this idea of death drive. Death drive is that we subconsciously pursue risk-taking or harmful behaviors either to inflict pain inward or outward to others. This also associates with the fact that we as humans don't want to be responsible for everything. We don't want to take responsibility. We want to be like free living creatures. Think of like a little pixie fairy. You want to be alone in the middle of like some cottagecore setting. Because of this, we try to unconsciously sabotage any success that doesn't align. It might look scary, but deep down, our ego doesn't want us to be successful, have to work towards something. I think there's a quote, and I was trying to do the research to find it, and I was listening to the Psychology of blah, 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 the 20-year-old podcast, Psychology of Your 20s, and she mentioned one of the quotes, but essentially where there's room for success, there's room for sabotage. Often we self-sabotage in the form of distracting. So think about when you are like procrastinating. You're like, oh, maybe instead I will wash the floors. I will clean off the counters. I'll do laundry. Or we will partake in an activity to numb ourselves because the pain and the stress is just too much. So that's when we might bring in like scrolling on our phones or just doing like substances or eating. Some people do. And that could be a whole other podcast in itself. I know I say that a lot. But this is because that stress is just so overwhelming that we don't know what to do with ourselves. Another aspect of psychology when it comes to self-sabotage that I mentioned was this learned helplessness. Us as people, we don't think that we have the authority to make our lives worse. We say, or we want to think that we're not in control of our outcomes. We don't need to take that action. Like, think about the friend that's like, oh, boo-hoo, this stuff is always happening to me. That is learned helplessness. And something alongside this is that we, as humans, we want to protect the ego. Our ego is this fragile little being. We want to paint ourselves to be the best that we could possibly be. And when we take authority in hardships and negative outcomes and failure, that's like a blow to our ego. And for protection, we want to make sure that we are high and mighty, that we have all the accolades, and this will make sure that all the people in our tribe will protect us again if a tiger comes. It is literally psychology for us to want to protect our ego. The fear of success and the fear of failure go hand in hand. Sometimes we are afraid of failing because we don't want to look stupid. Like, I was a perfectionist to the T. I used to have a clinical instructor that would sit me down and tell me, you have it in you, but you are not allowing yourself to fail. And because of that, you will never thrive. Which, like, I was like 19, bawling my eyes out. 19. How old was I? I was like 22. Whatever. But it's like we don't want to put ourselves in the opportunity to fail because we're going to lose what we would consider our tribe. Think about like when I was younger and I would post an Instagram picture and I'm like, oh my God, it only has like 5 likes right now? And I'm like, everyone's talking about me. No one likes me. Where are my friends? And that's because us as human beings, we want to be in a tribe. We want to have that protection. As cavemen, as we were going through evolution, people who had these strong connections meant that they were going to be able to mate and succeed and go through life. In Maslow's law hierarchy of needs, like literally connection, I like can't recall off the top of my head, but connection is one of the like bottom 2 like needed to survive. It is like innate for us to want to fit in. And so when we put ourselves in the position to be different, to potentially fail, that is a threat to our ego. That is a threat to us being protected. Low self-esteem makes it so we self-sabotage. We don't trust ourselves enough to reach our goals. We don't give ourselves the credit to do so. Part of us feels like we don't deserve it. Think about what we've heard in the past that might instill these thoughts subconsciously. An example is when we are little, if you ever had like ADHD or like a learning disability or learning difference, you may have heard like, wow, you have so much potential if only you could focus. Or like, if only you were able to be organized, you'd be such a better student. And like, I used to tell myself that when I had my concussion, and if only I could focus or make a normal, grammatically correct sentence, I would be perfect. And because we used to tell ourselves that during our formative years, when we heard it in our formative years, that is hardwired into our brains. That's a thought that we subconsciously tell ourselves, and we use it almost as a crutch. Like if we find ourselves not being able to focus, we're like, oh, it's that ADHD again. It's that concentration. And I will say there are times where, yes, concentration is like a neurocognitive difference, like a neurobiological difference in some brains. And that's why we have to seek supports, some of which I'm going to tell you, to better ourselves. But it's easier for us to lean on that as a crutch and not even try to tackle our goals than it is for us to actually try to transcend that and make it to where we want to go. Also, sorry, if you're not watching the video and you just heard me clap, I apologize. One of the biggest things that really stuck out while I was doing research on this is that our iceberg, like I'm gonna paint an iceberg picture. So at the tip of the iceberg, the one that people could see, that's what we would call our ego. Our ego. This is what we may present like what we want. Think about how some people would love to have all the accolades and millions of dollars and that beautiful mansion on the beach in California. And on the beach of California. Now let's look at the rest of the iceberg. This is where your core values are, your mannerisms, how you interact with the world, what you actually want in life. Are those the same, or is there dissonance between the two? And when I say dissonance, I mean what discrepancies are coming from that? Because if the top of the iceberg at the surface wants the accolades, the millions of dollars, the fame, the fortune. But if under the water, you would love to just feel happy in relationships and have a house that you could take care of and enjoy your privacy, do you see how those two settings are very vastly different? Okay, so we have the id, the ego, and the super ego. This is what I'm pointing up. It's backwards. So the id is deep down. So if the ego and the id want two different things, you are going to be unconsciously self-sabotaging. What this looks like is you might accidentally miss a few dates that you wanted to partake in. You might actually not fact check or not go over a script and realize you have all of these errors, or you didn't actually look at the resources. You might find that your work isn't as neat as you maybe would have wanted if it was more aligned to your true passion. Some other things might be, for example, you say you want a good guy, but you keep on going for really bad guys because at the end of the day, that's your comfort zone. Oh wait, delete that. And so we're going to transition. Those are a couple different big themes when I consider self-sabotage. And I think when we are combating self-sabotage, the most important thing is self-awareness. Where in your life are you self-sabotaging? There are a couple domains in life that I want you to consider. The big ones I think we all think about, like our interpersonal relationships, or even romantic relationships, like familiar relationships. We could count those as two different ones. We could, like, romantic relationships, interpersonal relationships, like friendships or family. We have career. What are you doing with your career that you find that you're self-sabotaging? Do you want to actually climb up the ladder? Or would you rather completely pivot and change careers entirely? Think about social. Are you actually doing things that you like? Do you like partying, or would you rather go to the farmer's market? Or if you go to the farmer's market, would you rather go out partying? To each their own. Financially, are you spending money to the capacity that you want? Are you making the money that you want to complete and actually follow through with? I've talked about metacognition before. Metacognition is the act of, what I would say, distancing yourself from your thoughts. So cognition, the act of thinking and processing. When you put yourself a little bit farther from your thoughts, that actually allows you to use the logical side of your brain to analyze what you're trying to communicate or what you're thinking. There are a couple different ways to do this. One that's easy, free, you can literally type it on your notes app, is journaling. Some journal prompts I like to use include, what is essential right now? Is this benefiting me in any way? I like to tell myself, would my higher self be doing this right now? Am I helping my higher self or future self by partaking in this action? And so something that I caught myself doing is like scrolling through Ulta and thinking like, wow, let's do some research on different beauty products. And yeah, sure, there's a time or place, but I also have like pore alerts I'm trying to do and calling Blue Cross Blue Shield and all these things. And I caught myself and I'm like, hey, is this something that I would be prioritizing right now? Is this what is the most essential thing that I could do right now? And just giving myself that self-talk, that opportunity to ask myself that question every so often is actually an executive functioning technique and can help me stay on task, sustain that attention a little bit longer on what I'm trying to complete. Another thing you could do is, like, I will sit and meditate and think about what are my core beliefs. I will link a big list in the show notes, but there are a couple worksheets that I've done myself where I see a ton of words and then you break it down to like 9 words that you align the most with. So they might be like creative, authentic, family, friendship, the balance, and then you work down the list of what you already grabbed. And then you essentially get to 3 words where you are focusing on like, wow, this is something that I try to integrate in everyday life. Another thing you could do is think about like pivotal life experiences. And this doesn't have to be like anything that has like ruined your life or has maybe not been super major life events like my concussion, but a pivotal one for me, and this is kind of funny, but it was learning how to spell apples with my grandpa. And for me, it's kind of funny because when I explained the feelings that really came up about it, it was like questioning, inquisitive, like connection, learning. And when you break down the emotions between the actions, that can help you dig up your core beliefs. And so if I look at my core beliefs of like I love learning and I love like playing around and making fun and light out of something that I was struggling with, because I did not know that there were 2 peas and apples, or I didn't get that E right. But I just remember walking on a beach and enjoying my life and bonding with my grandpa. And in contrast, if I am sitting at a laptop all day, not having fun, and like researching something that doesn't align with me, how am I going to really integrate that into learning, having fun, like inquisitive, presenting information in a fun way, unless it's something obviously I'm interested in. Maybe this wasn't a good example. But like think about the little experiences and try to see the patterns across it. Another thing that I've been doing, and I will pull up the Notion template if you are watching this, I'll also link it if you are not watching it but want to check it out, is I will have like 5 different columns. The first is like the date and time of an act I was trying to do. The next column is what was the act that I wanted to get done? What was the task I was doing? Was I doing an outline? Was I filming? Was I editing? Was I researching? The next column, the third, is what was I actually doing in that moment? Like it's kind of like I caught myself doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing, like a toddler. And so like a common one for me is scrolling on my phone, online shopping, daydreaming, massive one for me. Eating, like going to the kitchen because I think I'm hungry. And that's like indicative of like boredom. Which brings me to the 4th column is why did I run away from that task? How was I self-sabotaging it? And so like the first one is, like I'm bored with what I'm doing. It might be that I'm trying to numb myself because I'm too afraid to actually do it. I'm overwhelmed. It might be that I think I need to pivot, but I'm not ready to actually confront myself in that way, in that capacity. And those are some common ones for me. Something that you could do is do a deep dive on whether you are aligned with what you're doing or not. See what you feel and where you feel most like overwhelmed. And then in the 5th column, I will explain what I'm going to do next. So if I wanted to do the outline, okay, I'm going to break it into smaller chunks, or I need to research it a little bit more before I can actually do the outline. Now, it's all great when you can do it yourself. Journaling's a really nice technique to do metacognition tasks alone. But I would highly recommend also looking into cognitive behavioral therapy. So this can be done with a like trained mental health professional, a licensed psychologist, a licensed neuropsych. You might get some like licensed social workers that have learned CBT techniques. Don't quote me on that. And there are even like executive functioning skills that are based in CBT. What this person is trained to do is asking you prompting questions to dig a little deeper, or they teach you a technique to kind of rebuttal a persistent action. So if you're not asking yourself questions of, is this most essential? They'll give you tips to look for when you should ask. Like when you catch yourself 5 minutes on a phone, it's just scrolling, or when you are constantly going out and pushing back a task that you've been trying to complete. They kind of keep you accountable. You can also get accountability from your friends, from your family members, from your significant other, and just tell them, like, you know me best. You know me to a capacity that I can't always see. So if you're able to help me, I would really appreciate it. This is what I want to do in the next X months, X or so weeks. And like, my boyfriend will literally tell me, hey, are you going to burn yourself out by taking this other client? Or he will tell me, how's that paper coming along? Or even like having him as like a body next to me, that sounds weird. Having him next to me, like doing work, makes me want to do my work. Like that was probably one of my favorite things in college. Like doing work next to people made me actually do my work. Now, I know hardships come in life. Life is never fluid. Like, I'm someone who has been dealing with like weird autoimmune diseases, and the reason why I brought back Save Your Spoon is because my health has like steadily been declining slowly. We're really researching mast cell activation syndrome and like histamine intolerances, and as I do more research, there's overlaps between MCAS, that mast cell activation syndrome, and histamine, and ADHD, autism, and just seeing like how influential histamine and different autoimmune diseases can be on cognition and processing has really like just brought up something that I've really missed when it comes to talking about speech and hearing sciences and talking about like my love for the field that I'm in, speech pathology. And so I hope this video helps you kind of transcend hardships that you are going through, helps you like connect some patterns where you might be self-sabotaging and preventing yourself from actually reaching the goals that you're truly capable of doing so. And if you ever want to connect, if you have your own autoimmune, I keep on playing with my hair. If you have your own autoimmune disease condition or chronic health condition, or find yourself benefiting from these techniques, feel free to reach out to me. I will put my socials in the link below. But what I want to leave you with is there's so much basis in neuroscience when it comes to self-sabotage that I want you to give yourself grace during this process. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'm excited that Save Your Spoon is coming back, and stay tuned for more to come.